All right, Mitch Burcham back. This is Gavin Mehl. We're going to get started on another show here where we touch base. We had some really incredible shows in the past, Mitch, regarding the Bank of International Settlement and the Mandela upgrade and the all this the real big thing I wanted to talk to you about was also the energy, saving the grid in the United States. There's a podcast that Sean Ryan recently did with Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson asked Sean Ryan. He says, "So Sean, what's the number one thing you're most concerned about and problem right now?" And the typical answer didn't come to him at all. It was the grid.
Yeah.
The grid was his number one concern. And I feel like I'm in the dark here, Mitch. Can you please shed some light on this situation here? What's going on?
Yeah, the grid probably should be everyone's number one concern. There was a study that went through the congressional EMP task force that was originally tasked with, running the case studies on what would happen if a high altitude electromagnetic pulse attack, which if you're not familiar, is basically a nuclear weapon that it basically shoots electrons everywhere and fries all of the electronics within however large the radius is. And what they figured out was that the United States is incredibly vulnerable. And not only that, the people of the United States would be completely incapable of fending for themselves because they would not have access to clean water, as all of the water pumps are electrically charged. And so what would happen is 90% of Americans would die within 3 months of a grid outage. And it doesn't have to just be a EMP, which an EMP is obviously worst case adversarial scenario, but it could be a solar flare, which is a similar a coronal mass ejection could produce the same effects as an EMP. There was one that happened in the 1800s called the Carrington event that I think it fried the brand new, there was a cable that was laid underneath the Atlantic. They had just laid it. And then the Carrington event happened, fried it. They had to rerun it, fried everything that was built to that point. And so that's a problem. But then we're at the point where it's so fragile that, a squirrel or a slug could, like what happened in Japan. Think about this. A slug actually worked its way through a pinhole in a control panel and shorted out a circuit, and an entire neighborhood went down. Like that's the kind of stuff that we got to be thinking about. We can't have this level of fragility. But the biggest problem is that we only have three grids. So there are only three grids in the United States. There's the East grid, there's the West grid, and there's Texas. And those are all regulated by NERC and FERC. So I believe maybe FERC is actually above NERC, and NERC is the National Electric Reliability Corporation, and it's been basically given the task of regulating our interconnection area. And so we've got the East, West, Texas. East is responsible for 70% of the load in America. And these grids are separated by phases. So the alternating current is basically it's not in phase with each other in between these three grids. So if one side goes down, that doesn't necessarily mean that the other side goes down, because they're not using each other's alternating current phase to keep the frequency. But on the east side, you've got a giant grid that's all in phase, and it serves 70% of the load. And if there are some, critical failures in high voltage transformers and things start going down, what's going to happen is there's going to be a cascading failure through the entire Eastern interconnection, and 70% of people are going to lose power. And that would be absolutely catastrophic. If they hit all three at the same time, everyone would lose power. Um, it's the apocalyptic scenario.
Hmm.
There, it because
Doesn't sound like a conspiracy theory at all. It just sounds like, this is where we're at. I mean, we have this
it,
this fragile grid and we got to do something about it.
yeah, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's the reality of engineering the largest machine ever. This is the largest and most complicated machine ever, and it supports the lives of hundreds of millions of people. And those hundreds of millions of people have adversaries that know the critical links, and not only that, are inside the machine. All of these, controllers, all of these high voltage transformers, they're all from China, all of them. And not only are they compromised, but we've known they're compromised for a long time.
All right.
And
So all right, man. So you put out the grid on the edge report. It seems like you were really
mm-hmm.
motivated to get that out there to like notice people. Can you talk a little bit about that? What was or is that what you're kind of covering right now? What's in there?
Well, yeah. So this I didn't really go into the super details on like why the grid is fucked, basically. Um, in that report, I was mainly concerned with giving my interpretation of how to solve the problem because that's what isn't happening often.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys that are working on this stuff and are trying to sound the alarm, all they do is sound the alarm, and it's just constant alarm, and if people are going deaf. And what we need to start doing is explaining how the solutions come about and how to fix this, that not only makes the grid more resilient, but actually creates an energy abundance, because that's what it's about. It's not about having a super resilient grid only. It's about having abundant energy. So it's not just affordable, it's cheap, because cheap energy on a resilient grid makes every problem go away because you can just throw energy at it. And that's all we have to do for every problem. But right now, we can't throw energy at any of our problems. Our grid's too fragile. We've got no interconnection capabilities. If you want to interconnect into the grid a large load or a large generator, it takes like 5 years. And so our industry is getting, bottlenecked. We can't do anything. We can't build these things. And so we're trying to figure out, how we're going to do it. And the Grid on the Edge report describes the move from centralized systems to decentralized systems. But beyond that, it's a move from disparate systems to unified systems. So it's kind of a juxtaposition because everyone's thinking we need to have distributed energy in order to make sure that that we have redundancy, right? But if that isn't on a unified network, then you're still in the same position. You're not actually creating the network effects that you need to get the flexibility to manage that amount of redundancy. And so what I'm proposing in Grid on the Edge is unification without centralization. And that is the fundamental, that's the change that everyone's been waiting for. They've talked about it with, the introduction of like fractal grids, which is what I've described with Megawatt. And, we've talked about it with distributed markets on the distribution grid. So DSOs, which are distribution system operators, they operate underneath the RTOs or ISOs, which are the larger regional grid operators, and they manage distribution markets so that distributed energy resources like a smart thermostat or a EV fleet or a power wall in your house can actually participate in energy markets and get paid for what it's contributing to the grid, whether that is peak demand response, or whether it's, general wire investment deferment, right? Because if we don't have to build new wires, that is valuable in itself. If we can curtail the peak demand and utilize our wires that we already have, how do we get paid for that? And so what I'm proposing is a unified marketplace where edge devices not only own their own data, but can transact it peer to peer on a standardized and globally scalable digital base layer. And that is Metawatt.
That's all on Bitcoin
It,
built
it will
in.
it will only be on Bitcoin. And that's the reality. It's like
The only thing it's the only solution.
it's the only solution. And
Okay.
everyone, I've heard a lot of people talk about exactly what I'm talking about, but then they say, and a lot of people think that blockchain is the answer, but that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Blockchain will never work. Yeah, because you're looking at the wrong freaking blockchains. You thought that Bitcoin broke originally, and so you've been trying to figure out more and more complicated solutions. But over here, we just figured out that 1 megabyte block sizes are freaking stupid. That's all we did. It's like that's all we did, and that was it. And we were like, hey, this thing works. This thing works really good. It does everything we need. And so people are still down and out about what blockchain can do, when in reality, it's the only solution to unify the grid without centralizing it and continuing to propagate these same problems of cascading failures um, and the resilience issues that we have.
All right. All right. So, yeah, so that'll be a conversation. If people aren't already familiar with it, you're gonna have to go dig deep on what that means in Bitcoin, because there's a major disputes that happened back in 2017 when splits started happening and the block sizes stayed the same, or 1 megabit on one, and then it started growing on the other. So you have to go down that rabbit hole. But let me go back into this thing with Sean Ryan. He had another guy on there about he talked about. Energy on them. I mean, and this is wild. I mean, I don't think I believe this, but I just thought I would throw it out there. You mentioned that abundant energy is possible. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to ask you. He says that there's a guy he had on there was a scientist, and he said that China was mining something like plutonium or some sort of a gas on the moon, and they were taking that, and that's supposed to be a very abundant substance for energy, and it gives them a huge advantage. I mean, I don't really don't believe that personally, but it is what it is. And so I'm wondering what you talk about, like when you say abundant energy, what is that? Where's that coming from?
Well, there's a guy by the name of Jesse Pelton that I defer all of my abundance ideas to. And basically, he's a first principles guy. And all he does is he says, guess what? All right. The sun every hour shines down enough electricity for the entire US to use for an entire year. All right. In 2 days, the sun gives us enough electricity for the entire world for like 2 years or something. And I'm probably getting this wrong, but the reality is that the sun is so much bigger than every other energy resource. It's everything else is a rounding error compared to the energy that is being distributed wirelessly by the sun every day. And we have solar panels like that just sit there and take it and turn it into electricity without doing anything. We don't have to do anything. There's no machines, there's no guys on your roof shoveling coal. Like it just turns sunlight into electricity. And for anyone that thinks that, you know, we're going to go mine some stuff on the moon when and then bring it back here and then burn it up when the sun is distributing unlimited power every second of every day for free. It's like whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I'm and so it's and a lot of people are so caught up in the idea and that's the whole thing where it's like yes, there are problems with that. Solar energy needs storage and so how do we get that done? But the reality is that those two supply chains are working at a scale that absolutely nothing else on the planet is working at. China is building more solar than our entire nuclear fleet produces every. China is on track to produce an entire United States grid worth of solar every year by 2030. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about going to the moon and mining some rocks and bringing them back. We're talking about China building a United States in solar panels every year.
So that's a quantifiable thing. You sounds like you're pretty confident about. They're actually doing that right now.
That's what their supply chain is built to do. And they're demolishing everyone. And it's not because they're, you know, oh, we're so green and we want to protect the earth. It's because they understand that this is the most scalable and deployable technology for energy production ever created.
Okay. So one of the things as well is like the demand in from what I'm hearing from people in the Trump administration that the demand for energy consumption is growing exponentially, and especially with all these large language models and the AIs, you know. So it's like they're apparently it's just they've done some measurements on it, and it's just in an exponential growth. But there's not going to be enough energy production to keep up with it if we
Yeah.
don't do something
Well,
for the
what's going to
grid.
happen with the AI stuff is there was a really good white paper that was put out on this called offgridai.us. That's the website that it's on. Basically, we've got like a terawatt of land that's capable of putting solar on it and having a terawatt of data centers in West Texas, in Colorado, that would be off grid solar, battery, and natural gas microgrids. And they're like they're like 90% clean energy, and you can deploy them as fast as you can build solar, which is pretty fast. And the economics are way better than, because the only other option is just all gas, which, that's fine if you want to go that way. Most of these data center people they've got their mandates from the SEC or whatever they got to do to support clean energy. So they've got to go some route. And so a lot of people are thinking, small modular nuclear reactors, but I haven't seen one. I've seen a lot of solar panels out there producing power. I have not seen a small modular nuclear reactor out there producing power. So if they want to win the AI race, there's only one way to do it, and it's scale as much solar power as you possibly can, put it out in West Texas near a natural gas pipeline interconnection, and then fill the gaps with solar or with battery and natural gas. And that's how you build, and it can't be interconnected to the grid. But what happens is these power plants, these new power plants and data centers become the new hub for a new grid that's out in West Texas. And now you've got a new economy and a new grid where people can share, and there's more connectivity and there's more demand response, and you've got these industrial parks that are new grids, and then those grids can ultimately interconnect into the main grid. And that's what the fractal grid is. So these fractal grids are going to start being built, and they have to have a standard communication layer, a standard transactional layer that allows them to communicate across, or else they're going to be disparate systems forever. And so that's the ultimate goal of Metawatt and building these communication and tokenization systems on top of Bitcoin, is that this is the only protocol that can scale to that level. And it allows so much, untapped potential from a sustainability viewpoint. If you can track and trace every watt that moves through the grid, you know exactly how clean your energy was, right? It's not a guess. We know who used it. We know where it came from. You get peer-to-peer network effects if you'd like. You can implement rules. You can hard code contracts. I mean, there's so much that you can do, and it's just untapped potential sitting there waiting for us to be the first adopters. And let me tell you, the first adopters are going to have the most resilient grid on the planet, and that is the ultimate national security asset. Not only that, if you build the entire grid on Bitcoin, now you start adding Bitcoin to your national security reserves, and your actual economy is underpinned by the resilient infrastructure, which is not how it is today. We've got no resilient infrastructure underpinning our economy, and everything's cascading down the sides, and we're losing everything. And instead, you could hold hard assets that are actually useful inside of the grid. You can hold the digital commodity that makes the grid run, and you can mine it in the United States. You can have all of these different things that bolster your resilience in your economy, that make you a superpower in this new metanet world.
Dude, I mean, wow. I mean, it sounds like a freaking huge advantage that we
It's
could have if
gigantic.
we get ahead of it. And it's a little bit like the technology is so cutting edge, like that. While the grid is the problem, it seems like there's a disconnection between wrapping the people's head around it, with the psyop of Bitcoin. First of all, getting past the psyop, because that's
Mm.
the main problem, right? So then once you get past the psyop, then you're like, wait a second, you're putting everything on. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's how do we break through that, Mitch? I mean, it seems like there's a massive opportunity. I know you were doing a role, an advisory role for for some foundation or division. What was your you know
Right. So
what was that about?
I'm the national director of blockchain technologies with the Task Force on Homeland and National Security, which was formerly the EMP Task Force. It was founded by Dr. Peter Pry. And, we're a nonprofit that just tries to educate, do research and development on solutions. And I've taken, a front seat role because I believe, and our teams believe, that blockchain is the future for grid resilience, and that ultimately, metawatt and standardized communication protocols, tokenization protocols, are going to be critical to making this work. And so, we're still just working through that. I'm working to educate uh, my fellow executives on that board, and just try to get them to understand just how important this is, and just how inevitable it is. Um, and we're also working to educate the legislators. I've got some people that are close with um, the Texas senator. Oh, I'm blanking on his name. They just got a bill passed in Texas for grid resilience, and so we're going to be taking we're going to be using our time and our efforts to try to educate um, those people on how to best go about cybersecurity standards, communication standards, where we can use our technological advantages, our abundant solar, wind, natural gas resources, to make sure that we are the global leader in MetaNet. And what I keep saying about MetaNet is it's the complete integration of the electric grid and the internet. Because what's going to happen is, instead of utilities, you're going to have software companies that are looking at overlay systems and making trades, because you're going to have some people that manage the wires, but your actual electrical utility, they're going to be trading on your behalf. They're going to be basically AI agents that are watching the markets and using your assets to get you the best deal on power rates. And if there's a peak demand spike and you've got capacity, you can discharge and you can make money. And that's what is going to accelerate adoption of distributed energy resources like batteries on your in your house, which in the future every house is going to have a battery. It's going to be like your flat screen TV. Every house is going to have one. And we're going to have to coordinate those through markets. And that's what's key. And so rather than paying your utility, you're going to be in an agreement with, a sort of high frequency trader that's playing the markets and lowering your risk, making you money and advancing or quickening your payoff time on your assets. And that will all be running on Bitcoin. They'll all be settling their transactions on Bitcoin. And so those people, the miners, the overlay managers, or the overlay services providers, the actual aggregators that are making these trades, they need to not only, it's what they have to have is they have to have reliable electricity in order to make money, and they have to have reliable internet to make money. And that internet is based on Bitcoin. And so it'll all of the incentives align to make sure that Bitcoin and the electric grid are the most resilient systems on the planet. And they will just grow together and become this hyper interconnected fractal system that ultimately runs itself as AI gets better, data gets deeper, and we're gonna have a situation where we've got ultimate abundance because the power system is stable, it's secure. Our economics are based upon that resilient infrastructure. We're using hard money, and that's the future that I want to live in.
Sounds like a beautiful place. I mean, I'm wondering how exactly does this new grid built on Bitcoin, stop solar flares and these other problems, or how does it counteract that?
It doesn't stop solar flares. It just, with distributed energy resources, there's more nodes to, if you're not going to get these cascading failures from these giant power plants that go down or these giant transformers that go down. You're going to have your own little microgrid in your neighborhood, and everyone's going to have some extra capacity here and there, right? So if your home gets fried or your assets go down, someone else's assets are probably still up, and you can share so that someone still has power, or if a few people still have power, then we can share peer to peer. And all of a sudden we've got this super coordinated and dense network of assets that are capable of staying online when others go down. And that is fundamentally different from, the centralized client server model where the power plant is just spinning out in the boonies and sending you power. And if there's a break in the chain, everyone's down. And that's really the point. But you have to have a super sophisticated and frictionless distributed energy market on the edges to make that a reality. Otherwise, the demand fluctuations and the supply fluctuations are going to be, just too difficult to manage. And we're close. We're really close. I mean, people are already doing this. New York is doing it. Texas is doing it. But like I said, it's about unification without centralization. And that is the national security superpower that's available to us.
So if you could get on like, let's say if you could get a message over to Sean Ryan, because when I watch this show, he really appears like he gets it. He knows there's a problem. He knows it's the number one problem, but he doesn't know the solution. If you could get a message over to him, what would it be?
Unify the grid without centralizing it. That's what it's all about. That's what's necessary. And the only way to do that is a standard, scalable digital base layer that enables tokenization and peer-to-peer transactions.
All right. Yeah. So share this video out there, guys, and get it. See if we can get it to Sean Ryan, because it seems like Sean is the type of guy that is like, it blows my mind of how big he is now. But it's like it seems like he's the type of guy that would just like he's not looking for fame and he's not looking for the biggest influencer. He's looking for the most important, original, underground like podcast stories. Like that's what he wants, and something that really actually makes a difference. And I think that's what you provide here, Mitch. Like insight and understanding that you have to this. So hopefully we can. I want to provide like a springboard to get you on that show. I mean, that would be. Would you take it if
Oh
he said
yeah,
yeah?
I'm down to go on any podcast, and because at the end of the day, this isn't this isn't a competition for me, right? This is a necessity, and I'm going to be working on it until it's done, right? Regardless, whether someone else is doing it too. If someone else is doing it too, please let's do it. Like we need to. It's not about financialization. It's not about getting more money for my carbon credits. I don't care about that. That's a byproduct of what we're doing here. We'll get that if we build this tokenization platform. What we need is we need to have the standards so that we can unify the grid and protect it against all potential threats. And that's what it's about. I don't care about the carbon credit markets. Those are you can build those on my platform. Our platform. Let's build our platform. Let's build our grid. And let's make it resilient and let's make it abundant with cheap energy so that we can solve the rest of our problems forever and build an abundant and beautiful place to live.
Yeah, definitely. So where can people find you, Mitch?
I'm on X now. So underscore B1 Nary underscore. I am building my website now, binary.tech. And so that'll be up and live very soon. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn. You can hit me up there. But yeah, I'm always down for chats. If you've got ideas, if you've got expertise in these fields, this is a massive project. If you've got connections to the upper echelons of administration, that's always helpful, and we can start to educate up the ladder on how this stuff works, why it's useful and why it's inevitable everywhere. That's the other thing. Everywhere. We get to decide just how free our markets are. And Bitcoin is just a tool. You can either make free markets or you can create, this centralized monolith that, can shut down an address at any point, or you can create, a distributed market where everyone else owns their own data. And that's our choice. We get to decide. And I'm I intend to build the most free societies on the planet. And that's why I'm going to Texas. That's why I'm building Metawatt. And if you'd like to join me, hit me up.
Nice. Thanks, Mitch. I love it. Love to, great to see you. Let's do it again sometime.
Yep. Thanks,
All right,
Gavin.
everybody, hit subscribe and reach out to Mitch if you want to know more or and hit the ones. My name is Gavin. I'll see you at the top. Okay. Thanks, dude.